Hello, my fellow subjects of the internet out there. This is the Aromantic Shipper back again with the final New Year's, sorry, not New Year's review, but end of the year review, I guess you could say. And what a review it is, because I am going to be talking about for my final talk. I'm finally fucking done. Oh my gosh. But anyway, for my final review of this year, until we go into the new year of 2023, I am going to be talking about The Amazing Spider-Man 2. A movie which I have seen before, but I checked it out after not watching it for a while. And, oh boy, if The Amazing Spider-Man movie was hated, then this sequel is seen as the absolute bottom of the barrel by so many people. It just gets shits on. It just gets shitted on constantly, like all over the internet. And you know what? I think it's massively overhated. I do not think this movie is nearly as bad as everyone says it is. And here's the funny thing. Because, see, with this movie, like, so many people, like, think of it as, like, oh my gosh, this is, like, the worst Spider-Man movie of all time. It's so incredibly, hilariously bad. And it's, like, but what's also kind of interesting is that, like, there is a section of people who think this is, like, the best Spider-Man movie out there as well. Like, if you don't believe me, I'm being serious. Like, there's actually a movie on YouTube. Sorry, not there's a video on YouTube talking about why The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the best Spider-Man movie, and I go into the comment sections of like clips from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and people saying, oh my gosh, this was like the best Spider-Man movie, I loved it so much. So, the haters might deny it, but a lot of people really fucking love The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And while I certainly don't agree that it's like the perfect movie, or like even the best Spider-Man movie, I still think there are some really great aspects of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 that people really just ignore. And in talking about it as if it's like the worst piece of shit ever. So I'm going to talk about that right now. First of all, in terms of things I liked about it, this movie looks so fucking good. Oh my gosh! Like, seriously, the direction and the CGI in this movie is absolutely fantastic. This is like one of the best looking movies, like, in general, I have ever seen. It's so incredibly vibrant. It's so incredibly well directed. It's just fantastic. Like, everything about the look of this movie is done so well. Other things, of course, Gwen once again proves to be Spider-Man's objectively best love interest. Rather than being engaged to my son, the astronaut, in this movie, she continues to be an active character, pushing the plot forward, and she actually has meaningful conversations with Peter in this movie. Again, their chemistry is just fantastic, and I love their interaction scenes. Also, this movie is honestly one of the things that's underrated about it, in my opinion, is that there's quite a few scenes that are genuinely pretty funny in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And not unintentionally funny in how bad they are, although there are some scenes of that as well in this movie, maybe a few of them, but there are some legitimately really funny scenes in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 that are definitely trying to be funny as well. Like the whole distraction scene where the whole distraction scene that happens in the hallway where Gwen's trying to get away. That was fantastically choreographed, and everything about it just really makes me laugh. And there are a lot of moments like that in this movie. The action scenes in this movie, oh my gosh, they're so fucking amazing. The action in this movie is fantastic. Seriously, like, honestly, the action in the Amazing Spider-Man 1 was good. It was, very well shot, but one of my issues with it was that they kind of made too many cuts and didn't really have, the takes weren't really as long as they should have been, and, again, it was sort of not really allowing me to, fully get into the action, with it just, like, cutting basically every 2 seconds or whatever. But in this movie, like, I mean, the action is just so freaking good. Like, seriously, I think the action in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, the action scenes, like, they might be the most underrated thing in this movie. It is so good. Like, seriously, it is way better than you think or remember. Like, the Times Square fight, do I even have to say anything about that? It's perfection. It is perfection. It is so good. Like, it might be the best use of slow-mo I have ever seen. And it is such a perfect portrayal of Peter's spider sense and how he utilizes it in combat situations. It's just, oh my gosh. And like, oh, but I'm not done gushing though. I'm not done gushing because Spider-Man versus the Green Goblin at the end of this movie, so many people fucking sleep on this fight scene. But you know what? Spider-Man versus the Green Goblin in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the best fight scene in any of the Webb or Raimi movies. You know? Yes, even better than the train scene in Spider-Man 2. I am dead serious. Like, the only real issue is that it's too short because it's like only 2 minutes long, and they definitely could have had to go longer because it's supposed to be, the big ending climactic fight of the movie. But again, those 2 minutes of the fight are absolutely breathtaking. Seriously, I have rewatched that fight like 15 times in a row by now. Like, the music, the directing, the environment, like, the way that Spider-Man makes use of the environment. Like, literally, in the climax of this fucking fight, like, Harry is trying to pin Spider-Man down, and he has to focus on holding up Gwen while also in this giant clock tower environment. And what Spider-Man does is he basically sorry, it's just difficult to explain it because it's incredibly complex in the way that this fight plays out. But basically what happens is, Spider-Man shoots his webbing through the hole of a clock gear and then wraps that webbing around Harry's neck, and the clock gear, as the machinery push it forward, is used to strangle Harry and get him away from Peter when he's down. It's just like, oh my gosh, who comes up with this stuff? It's so incredibly creative the way that they use it. It's like, seriously, go rewatch this fucking fight scene between Harry and Peter at the end of this movie. It's so incredibly good, and I don't understand why almost nobody talks about it. It's so fucking amazing. Oh my gosh. Seriously, like, and the utter intensity of it too. This fight is incredibly intense. Like, with it, how it, perfectly builds to Gwen's death at the end, with Spider-Man literally trying to stop time, like literally him putting the foot in the gear of the clock tower, and it's, oh my gosh, it's so fucking good. And the fact that Gwen actually does die at the end, it's so incredibly well constructed in every way. This fight scene is so good, and almost nobody ever talks about it. It's like, oh my gosh, seriously. Overall, there are a ton of things that I really love about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and that are really good about it, but there are also a ton of problems as well. It's kind of a goddamn mess, and honestly has a lot of the same problems as Spider-Man 3 does, because, like, here's the thing, it tries to juggle way too much damn stuff, and stuff that is introduced in this movie that is maybe initially good just kind of gets spoiled by the end. I mean, like, okay, so a good example is the villain, Electro, which is, again, another main problem with this movie, the villain. I honestly kind of felt for Max, at the beginning with how he was, this person that life was constantly taking a giant dump on, with how he was completely unappreciated throughout his life. And, his interaction with Spider-Man at the beginning of this movie, ended up giving him that massive, boost of confidence, and that was really cool and nice. With how he, didn't know what was going on and didn't really choose to get the powers that he did, and how he was kind of, freaking out and obviously not really being able to handle it at first. So I feel like this movie has a very good setup for Max, and with, establishing, who he is and, why he might be, initially resentful of Oscorp, of course. But then Max suddenly decides that he hates Spider-Man because he was getting too much attention. So he tries to kill Spider-Man, and it doesn't make any sense. It's so poorly written, and it's like, then, and again, what's even worse is that Electro in this movie, he has so many hokey lines that feel so incredibly out of place. Like, oh, it's my birthday, now it's time for me to light my candles. It's like, what? Come on, really? I can't take Electro seriously in this movie. He's very poorly written. And then again, seriously, literally at the end of this movie, like, he just dies. Like, unlike how in the first movie, like, I didn't really think the Lizard was very good or very well written in the first Amazing Spider-Man, but, you know, Dr. Connors was at least humanized and sympathetic in that first movie, and there were legitimately emotional moments with him, even if the actual writing of the Lizard was very poor. But it just feels so, like, odd to me that in this movie, you know, that Peter Parker is so uninterested in, like, trying to appeal to Max's humanity and just basically kills him at the end of the movie, when, like, especially after the fantastic Times Square scene where he literally tried to do just that before and actually talk him down and get him to calm down. But, like, apparently he's not interested in that at all at the end of the movie. It's just like, it feels so odd and not really, you know, congruent with what the themes of Spider-Man are supposed to be. And I don't know. And then there's Harry, who, despite not being referenced at all in the first movie, is apparently Peter's best friend that they always were together. And Harry is honestly fine at first in this movie, but I mean, first of all, it feels like such a waste to kill off his father, Norman Osborn, like, immediately in the first scene where he is introduced. I mean, that's kind of a letdown, isn't it? Like, literally, you only use him for one scene. It just doesn't really make much sense to me. But then it's just part of how, again, this movie feels very rushed, and it's trying to introduce a bunch of fucking things and, like, going on from thing to thing to thing and whatever. And then Harry is, you know, basically told by his father, of course, in that scene, that, you know, the disease killing him is genetic. So he is rushing to find a cure because his genetic illness, his own Harry's genetic illness, I mean, is developing, like, super rapidly and is gonna die soon, apparently, despite the fact that his father lived pretty freaking long with the disease. So I don't understand what the real rush is. Like, it doesn't really make much sense. But anyway, Harry needs Spider-Man's blood, and Spider-Man comes and tells him that he can't give it to him. And I don't understand how Harry did not realize immediately that it was obviously Peter under the mask. Like, he literally he's not disguising his voice. His mannerisms are all, like, the same as Peter has. That was just, like, a really goofy scene that didn't really need to be in the movie. And then, like, he says, oh, you're a fraud, Spider-Man. Honestly, this whole plot line with Harry trying to get Spider-Man's blood is, like, confusing on multiple levels and not really explained very well, because, like, I mean, here's the thing. Harry would have had, like, researchers working to, like, analyze the blood and stuff, like, and trying to, you know, find a cure for it that way. And because obviously he knows, like, what happened with the Lizard and all that kind of stuff, so he wouldn't just be like, but the movie like treats it as if Harry is just going to, like, inject it straight into his veins like it's heroin. And it's like, what? No, it's what? It's just, it's so messily handled, and it I don't know, it's just really very poorly written, in my opinion, that whole segment of the movie. And in addition to that, even though the Green Goblin versus Spider-Man fight scene, which I was completely gushing about before, and Gwen's death, you know, they were fantastic scenes all on their own. Again, just taken on their own, that is probably my favorite fight scene in the movie, in any of the Spider-Man movies. And Gwen's death scene, incredibly emotional, you know, incredibly heartbreaking, and the actors are really pouring their heart out in that. And but Harry, again, the problem is that, like, this would have been even better, like, taken in the context of the franchise, if this was actually built up more. But Harry kind of just shows up at the last 5 minutes of this movie trying to kill Gwen, and it's really not very well built up at all. Like, and I'm gonna say it, like, Harry just does not look very good as the Green Goblin. He kind of looks pretty goofy, in my opinion, and I don't know, it's just, again, this would have worked better if there had been more setup and more time. But they're just trying to rush through a lot of things in this movie, and it feels very messy, and it feels not really that well written, and it's just like, I don't. Here's the thing: this movie, much like Spider-Man 3, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 definitely should have been split up into 2 movies. It has no business being just one movie on its own. See, so here's basically my rewrite of what would happen if the Amazing Spider-Man were split up into two movies. I think, so first of all, what would have happened is the Amazing Spider-Man 2, this movie, would have focused on Electro and, you know, him as a villain, of course, you know, Peter trying to figure out the real truth about his parents. That would be the plot of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And then The Amazing Spider-Man 3, you know, that movie would focus on the final villain of the franchise, you know, Oscorp itself, which is basically this corrupt arm of the military-industrial complex that has created both the Electro and the Lizard, and is kind of, again, Oscorp is kind of the main villain of this franchise and how it is portrayed. And then, you know, the third movie would all be focusing on how to ultimately take it down in the end. And, you know, and then basically in the third movie, you know, after Oscorp is brought down by Spider-Man and, you know, maybe Black Cat dies, I guess, then at the end of this movie, you know, Harry, who has become like the CEO of Oscorp, you know, he goes out for revenge, and the final fight ensues, and, you know, Harry, you know, kills Gwen at the end of the movie, and that would be basically be, you know, what would happen at the end of the third movie. But again, it feels so incredibly rushed when you try to do all this shit in just one movie for the sequel to the first Amazing Spider-Man, and it's just like, it's really too rushed, and there's a lot of poor writing in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But overall, even though it has a ton of significant problems and is not as good as the first Amazing Spider-Man, overall, I still like The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I still enjoy watching this movie. I mean, I really did. In my opinion, it's better than 2 of the Raimi movies. You heard that right. I like it better than Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 3. That's my hot take of this video, that I think The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is better than those movies. So basically, in the end, what I would have to say is my ranking for all of the Spider-Man Raimi and Webb films goes something like this. So in first place, we have Spider-Man 2, which I think is the best movie out of the bunch. It was really, really, really good. In second place is The Amazing Spider-Man, the first one. I would say that is my second favorite. In third place is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Yes, this movie is my third favorite Spider-Man movie. And in fourth place is Spider-Man 3. And at the bottom of the list is Spider-Man 1. That's honestly probably my least favorite, even though it's maybe not the worst, but it's still my least favorite. I have the least things to enjoy about it compared to all of the 4 other movies. So I know it's a very unconventional ranking, and a lot of people would probably disagree with me, but those are my honest thoughts. So people will be asking me probably, like, what do you think of the MCU movies, the Spider-Man movies? I have not actually seen them. I know I'm like super behind and stuff, but I am this year of 2023, or next year, because when this video will be coming out, whatever. But you know, I am going to try to watch/rewatch every single MCU movie to get caught up. So I will then see you know, the MCU Spider-Man movies, and especially No Way Home, which is obviously the movie that, like, everybody is talking about, because, you know, all 3 Spider-Men, you know, kind of come together in that movie, and that'll be really interesting to see, but I have to sort of rewatch the other 2 MCU Spider-Man movies before that. So, but yeah, basically, this has been all my thoughts on the Spider-Man movies before Spider-Man was in the cinematic universe. So, yeah, if you have your own thoughts, leave them down in the comments below. This has been the Aromantic Shipper. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and as always, remember, just because you can't feel love doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people to. Bye!